Quite sure what my remarks are going
Well,
to be.
there's some new policy, unless it's over 3 hours or something like that to drive.
All right, now you're really trying to be like me.
Four and a half.
Where's Dale? No, the only reason I'm looking for him
No,
because I was told by rumor that he
matter of
also
fact, going
wears
to
Christmas
Memphis.
Oh, he
ties.
does, yeah.
Johnson City,
Where's Dave?
West Tennessee or Upper East,
Well, he knows the
Nashville.
meeting wasn't
They
posted
make you
until he
drive. It's
won.
about a
So.
2
Oh,
hour
that's
drive.
probably right.
So.
He's very precise in those things.
If it snows, I won't be opposed to that.
Not verbally, but it was in
How about you?
one of the documents.
The
It's
Knox?
going to be like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, it's 105
All
miles.
right. Oh, okay.
I've driven that
That's
just a
going
little over an hour.
talk to John about.
Shirley. Yeah. Either she
Especially if
lies
it's
to
on
me
this
or
side
us.
where Pellissippi
Uh,
is. You got to go to the other
Oh,
side down.
David Zedegger. In her,
Uh-huh.
I mean, either all of this was an
Yeah.
11th hour deal with
Pellissippi is on this
Fuentes,
side.
you know, because she was initially
In
coming
fact,
up
about the first or second
and
exit,
to talk in case something came up about the object.
that was
But then she
real
put
convenient.
Zedegger.
That was on
Well, she told me, I talked to her last week, and she told me that
Oh, man. Lost it to,
I knew about the change. She was going to go to New York, somewhere where there was a conference going on with football
Columbia.
coaches.
okay.
And she asked me,
Yep. Bobby, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
she asked me if David needed to come.
Yep.
And I said, I'm not
I
real
should
sure
have
he
made a
does.
list.
I was going to mention it, but I don't think there won't be a lot of conversation about it.
Probably
Yeah.
would.
And she decided that she wanted him to be.
Okay.
What did she tell you?
Well, no, she. Yeah, I'm with you.
Y'all in here.
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
but that was the context.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this can.
They didn't say, but
Yeah. And I gave
temporary
Zedegger a
was 40.
letter because he said Shirley.
And then
I mentioned the
it
lady.
was 35. It was low.
She had a copy.
Because the roads were good.
No, he didn't.
She just stayed in
That's fine. Procedure.
In some areas, we
It's
had
just
some
that
black
since he
ice.
was here, I just wanted him to know what had been transmitted.
That's why I didn't drive.
Yep.
He stayed on black ice.
That having been said. Let me go ahead and call the quarterly meeting of the Tennessee Board of Regents, the winter meeting, to order. And welcome all of you to our meeting. I hope everyone enjoyed the lunch that we had preceding the meeting. Procedurally, I think everyone knows, but I will mention it yet again. Our meetings are webcast live, so the equipment on the sides of the room and the cameras is part of that process. So to allow the public greater access to our meetings, so I wanted everyone to be aware of that fact. As a personal aside, I want to thank my chancellor, or our chancellor, for ensuring that I was not the only odd man out and that he decided to wear a Christmas tie as well. So
There you go.
I appreciate that fact. But we have a lot of items on our agenda today, as you will see. But given the items that are on the agenda, a lot of them are informational items, and we should move rather quickly through the agenda. I've not noted any elected officials here in the audience. I do know that the Chancellor is going to speak to a subject to which I apologize for stealing some of his thunder on it, but I am personally pleased, as a number of you as members of the Regent are, with the recent affirmation of the unconditional affirmation of the accreditation of Tennessee State University. They have done a tremendous job, and I think we owe them an applause for the work that they have done, because that's not, as you as members of higher ed know and understand, that's not an easy feat to accomplish, but I think it's great that they have gotten that done in such a short period of time. With that having been said, I will turn to the Chancellor for any opening comments that he might have prior to the roll call.
Mr. Chairman, I might just go ahead and say a few more things about TSU. Portia is not here. President Shields is not here today, but I believe she is watching the proceedings. I talked to her this morning, and she said she would be. So I'm very hopeful that she just heard your remarks and the reaction of the board. But we are quite pleased. The challenges at TSU are significant, as y'all know, we've talked about. And while there are some folks who continue to express concern about TSU, I think we can feel confident that we have a good leader in place who's making the kinds of changes that need to be made in order to position TSU to be a very attractive institution when we go with the permanent search. We'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. But getting the accreditation issue behind us is a very big thing. And they are to be congratulated, and Dr. Shields would be the first to tell you that it is truly an effort of a lot of people coming together to make that work. So the faculty and staff there under her leadership should be very proud of what they have accomplished, and I think we can look forward to continued improvements in operations at TSU, and they will be the institution that we want them to be and that is needed here in Middle Tennessee. So it really is a great thing. So.
Mr. Vice Chair, if it be appropriate, I'd like to suggest or offer a motion that the board and our Vice Chair and Chancellor, in a letter to Dr. Shields congratulating her, the faculty, and all those involved in accomplishing this unconditional SACS accreditation. That was a major hurdle and accomplishment, and I think it would be worth a letter or resolution from the board, some communication of congratulations.
I think that would be an appropriate gesture on our part. I will look to our General Counsel. Do we need to, if it's a letter, no formal action would be needed, but if we did a resolution, do we need to actually go through and conduct a roll call and establish a quorum? Or
You would want to convene the meeting and call the meeting to order, and then you could make any appropriate motion that you saw fit.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other initial comments? If not, I would ask Chris Modisher to call the roll so that we can establish an agenda for the formal action of business.
All right. Regent Copeland?
Here.
Regent Duckett?
Here.
Regent Ferris? Regent Gatz? Here. Regent Griscom?
Here.
Regent Johnson?
Here.
Regent Kisber?
Here.
Regent Markham?
Here.
Regent Montgomery?
Here.
Regent Reynolds?
Here.
Regent Roddy?
Here.
Regent Thomas?
Here.
Regent Varlin?
Here.
Regent Weeks? You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Montashire. Next item, and Regent Roddy, do we want to take that request under new business would be my recommendation. And I'll make a note to follow up as part of new business for the formal resolution.
Or a letter's
Or a
sufficient.
letter for TSU. Having said that, then the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our September 23rd, 2011 regular quarterly board meeting and the minutes of the November 21, 2011 special call session. Those minutes have been provided to all board members. Does anyone have any changes to any of those minutes? If not, a motion to accept those minutes would be appropriate. Is there a motion to accept them? It's been motioned by Regent Montgomery and second by Regent Copeland. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposes the same sign. Minutes from those meetings have been approved. Next item on the agenda is the report of interim actions. As you as members know, between board meetings, the Chancellor is authorized to conduct activities on behalf of the board, and I will call on Regent Morgan at this time for any comments regarding interim actions that have occurred.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you all have had the report we circulated, I believe, on December 1st that outlines kind of the normal business transactions of the office since our last quarterly meeting. And pending any questions, I would recommend the board's approval of the report of interim action.
Thank you, Chancellor Morgan. Is there a motion to approve interim actions that have been conducted by the Chancellor?
Second.
Motion by Regent Griscom, second by Regent Kisber. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, this is a matter that requires voice vote. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Thank you. Next, we have on the agenda the report of the Regent's Award for Excellence in Philanthropy. Philanthropy. That's easy for me to say today. Yes. I'd ask Regent Roddy at this time if you would present that report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm pleased to share with the board the name of a recent recipient of the Regent's Award for Excellence in Philanthropy, Mr. Millard Oakley. Mr. Oakley received the Regent's Award for Excellence in Philanthropy on April 29th during an award ceremony on the campus of Tennessee Tech University. Regent Steve Copeland was present and presented the award to Mr. Oakley. Millard Oakley has and continues to demonstrate his commitment to teaching and learning and improving the quality of life in our state. He is a proud, lifelong resident of Overton County and has donated invaluable time and resources to Tennessee Tech University in many ways. In 2005, he made a $2 million challenge gift to the new Center for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics at Tennessee Tech and encouraged others from the region to contribute. His gift, in turn, spurred support from many people in the community to help the university strive toward reaching its fundraising goal. In addition to the STEM Challenge Grant, Mr. Oakley, through First National Bank, provided more than $141,000 for Tennessee Tech University's School of Nursing building campaign by sponsoring Vince Gill in a concert that was held on campus. Through this concert, Mr. Oakley encouraged all First National Bank employees to participate in the fundraising effort. Thanks to the hard work of each employee, Tennessee Tech was able to save personnel costs involved in the production and promotion of the concert. Every local bank employee helped in some capacity, some by selling tickets, others promoting the event or serving as an usher at the event. Mr. Oakley has a history of supporting education through our communities. Beyond what he's done for Tennessee Tech University, he and his wife have made significant contributions to Volunteer State Community College, the Overton County Library, and the White County Library. Mr. Oakley's stellar record of civic, community, and professional and philanthropic service speaks for itself. He is a beloved member of the communities he represents, and he is a business leader beyond reproach. The board appreciates having the opportunity to acknowledge the contributions and commitment of Mr. Oakley to Tennessee Tech University and higher education. For further comments, I'd like to ask Dr. Bell to come to the podium at this time.
Thank you, Regent Roddy, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to be here with you to celebrate Millard Oakley. You all have heard Regent Roddy describe his contributions to Volunteer State, to the libraries at Livingston and at Sparta, to the STEM Center program at Tennessee Tech and the nursing school at Tennessee Tech. You may not know also he has leased the entire Oakley farm to Tennessee Tech. This is a pioneer farm dating back to the 1700s, and it is now called the Oakley Sustainable Agriculture Farm. 1,800 acres and 800 head of cattle, which Millard is very, very proud of. He was a member of this board and helped our entire state as it moved forward in higher education. Millard and J.J. Oakley have truly impacted generations of Tennessee residents. He's deeply committed to the Overton County and the Upper Cumberland area, and he's committed to our youth in our state. You did not hear, but I think many of you already know that Mr. Oakley has a lifelong record of civic and professional and philanthropic service that truly does speak for itself. But he's also made exceptional contributions to our state and our nation. You may remember that he was elected 4 terms to the Tennessee State Legislature. He served 1 term on the state's Constitutional Convention. He served as general counsel for the U.S. House of Representatives. He served on the governor's cabinet as a commissioner of insurance. And he currently serves on the board of directors of the Tennessee Tech University Foundation and the board of First National Bank. He truly has had a lifelong career. But I also must remind you, and everyone here knows him, that life with Millard can be exciting. Former Chancellor Charles Manning can tell you about how much fun we had taking a tour of the Oakley Sustainable Agriculture Farm with Regent Oakley at the wheel of his 4-wheel drive Jeep. Charles was just a bit concerned when Millard pulled into the roaring river and began driving upstream. Millard, and each of you can tell stories like that. Millard and J.J. have been a blessing to Overton County. They've been a blessing to Vol State in Livingston, to Tennessee Tech University, and to the state of Tennessee. It's been fun, literally fun, to work with this great philanthropist, and I look forward to many, many more times of working with him, and I thank each of you for giving me time to discuss his great work. thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Mr. Vice Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank-
Chair, may I make a comment, please?
Yes, Regent Copeland.
Many of you know, if not, I want to say that Millard is, since I'm from Overton County, I consider him one of, if not my best friend in life. And I'm honored to be in that position. But I want to take just a moment to tell you that the things that you're seeing him do publicly just doesn't touch how deeply this man cares for his fellow man. There's been times he's called me, repeated times, I can't remember the number of times, and said, Steve, if you got $1,000 with you, and if I do, fine. If I didn't, I'd go get it. I want you to take that to the Jones family or the Smith family or whatever, but don't you tell them where it came from. And not only has he done that with me, but he has other friends that I know he has used them as a carrier. This man has a heart of gold. He truly does. In fact, he called me last Monday and he said, if you want to, meet me at the Livingston International Airport Thursday morning, and we'll fly to Biloxi. It won't cost you anything, except that any gambling you do or any women you chase, you have to do it on your own. But other than that, it won't cost you a dime. And that's not just the way Millard treats me. That's the way he treats everyone. If you're ever with him at lunch or dinner, you just have to work the waitress to get a chance to pay for anything. He's just the most benevolent person I've ever known, and I consider myself to be so lucky and fortunate to have a friend like Millard Oakley. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Regent Copeland. Any other comments? I, too, want to echo, I've had the pleasure of serving briefly with Millard here on this board, and I saw that kinder, gentler side of him, and he is very, we are very blessed to have someone like him helping, not just in his community, but in higher education and throughout, he and his wife, JJ. So I appreciate your comments, Regent Copeland, as well as that of Dr. Bell and Regent Roddy, because this is truly a recognition that's well-deserved, and we all respect Millard very much. Appreciate that. In my haste to move through what I indicated was a packed yet quick agenda, I did forget item 3 on the agenda, and that is the committee reports. And so I'd like to, at this time, back up to item 3, which is the committee reports that have occurred since our last meeting. And the minutes from the following committees have been provided to all of the board members, and unless anyone opposes and would like to vote on the minutes individually, we will act on the following minutes jointly and take one vote. At this time, I would ask if anyone wants to act on any of the minutes that you have in your packet separately, and those are the minutes of the November 15th Audit Committee meeting, the minutes of the October 28th meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Conflicts of Interest, the minutes of the special called meeting of the November 15th meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Capital Outlays. And I will note that this was the first committee meeting and no action was taken. Action was actually taken on the November 29th meeting, and those minutes will be provided under new business. Does anyone object to approving those minutes as a packet? If not, a motion to approve those minutes would be appropriate. Motion by Regent Reynolds, second by Regent Griscom. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, This item requires a voice vote. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Those minutes have been approved. Apologize for my oversight, but appreciate the approval. Next item is the Chancellor's report. Regent Morgan. Excuse me, Chancellor.
That's all right. I'd be honored to be Regent. Although the pay's not quite as good. I'll be brief. I would like to acknowledge Dale Sims. I suspect that he has a Christmas tie on as well. If he doesn't, I would be quite disappointed in him.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I won't take a lot of time, but there are a couple of things I want to share with you. One in particular is an event that took place October 31st and November 1st that was the first of what we hope is at least 2, possibly 3 completion academies in Tennessee. Some of y'all will remember that Tennessee back October a year ago, I think it was, David, Tennessee was a participant in the first National Completion Academy that was sponsored by Complete College America. And the idea of a completion academy, and in that case there were 8 states who came together, and the idea was it was an opportunity for a team from each of those states to go and spend, in that case it was 3 days, I think, of really intensive planning time with that team, being exposed to various kinds of innovations and strategies that were being used around the country, all directed at trying to enhance the state's ability to pursue their completion agenda. Now, we're going to talk a little more about completion agendas in a later part of our meeting today. But the idea was that we would come back from that completion academy as a state with a plan toward pursuing our completion agenda. And the subject areas around which the experts, the so-called content experts, was around time to degree, program structure, outcome-based formulas, and remedial and developmental education. Well, part of the plan that we, our team from Tennessee, and it included the University of Tennessee system as well as Board of Regents, THEC, and business leadership and legislative folks. Part of our plan was to hold a completion academy or hold a series of completion academies in Tennessee. So this past October 31st, November 1st, we did that. Now, we were able to do that because Complete College America granted us, a part of a grant that they gave us, so they allocated about $100,000 to help us pursue that. AT&T contributed 25 or 50, when was it, 25? I believe $25,000 toward that effort. And then we were able to supplement those dollars with funds that we had available to bring together teams from 8 of our campuses, really for the purpose of having a couple of intensive days of planning activity, really aimed at giving them an opportunity to get off campus, to come together, to think together as a team about what are those specific things that they could be doing to supplement their strategic plan, to really focus on completion. We had national experts as well as in-state experts that were able to come in and talk about particular things that they had done. We had folks literally from all over the country. We had people from Florida, from New York, and California, or 3 places that I recall off the top of my head, of folks coming in. And I think it's fair to say that in the beginning, the teams from the 8 institutions, and there were, I guess, 8 to 10 members of each of those teams, probably came in a little bit skeptical about what was going to happen and whether this was going to be worthwhile, and Regent Weeks was on one of those teams. And I think it's fair to say, Linda, that people were a little bit skeptical about what they were likely to encounter over the course of a couple of days. But I really believe, and based on the reports that we got back, feedback we got back from participants, they left energized, having really had a great opportunity to think together about strategies that could be employed at their institutions, and left with a high amount of energy. I mean, I really think it was an outstanding opportunity for us to help our institutions get the right people together, thinking in the right way about what it is that can happen at their institutions to really move forward on the student success agenda. So it was an exercise that I think was extraordinarily worthwhile. It's one we will replicate in the spring. We've learned some things from the first instance, and this spring we'll have another, and hopefully have another following that, so that all the institutions in both systems will have had an opportunity to participate in that kind of event. But Linda, you got anything you want to add with that?
Many of us did go in skeptical because we weren't quite sure what we were going to be expected to do. But I know on the team that I was on from Dyersburg State, and I think this echoes the responses we heard from our other institutions in both the TBR system and the UT system. People did come away energized, and I think we saw that we have incredible resources within the TBR system from other institutions in terms of sharing ideas. So a lot of connections were made there for where we can visit each other, where we can exchange ideas with each other, and with the UT system too. So I think everybody came away feeling that we could work steadily toward the complete college, and also more of a success, not just complete, but so that the students who completed were perhaps more successful by redoubling our efforts at what we're doing. So it was a very positive experience. Long, but very positive.
Yeah, it was very intense. I mean, there was no time for relaxation during the course of the 2 days. I also want to share with you, and some of you I know are aware of this because you participated, but we are in that time of year where each of our institutions are reaching out to their local legislative delegations and having meetings to kind of update them on what's going on with their institutions, but also giving us a system, giving us the ability to talk about agendas. And we're going to talk further today about legislative agendas. But those are really valuable meetings, and to the extent that you can participate. I know Steve was in the one at Cookville the other day, and Bobby was at Ball State. But to the extent you can participate in those, it's a great thing to do. We'll try to make sure that it's on, that we give everybody notice that when these things, I think we do a pretty good job of that, but we'll try to make sure that you know when those are going to happen, and have an opportunity to do that. Several of them have already occurred, but we still have a few yet to go between now and the time the session starts. Last thing I'll mention, or the next to the last thing I'll mention, is our budget hearing. Many of y'all were able to go to the budget hearing. It occurred at the afternoon of the committee chairs meeting. It went very well. For those of you who weren't there or didn't get to observe it, it was really good conversation. Governor Haslam is engaged, very engaged in education issues, and clearly had done quite a bit of homework, and we had a good conversation about where we are and where we're going. As you know, I think we did discuss this at the committee chairs meeting. THEC has recommended an improvement for higher education of roughly $28 million. I think, Dale, is the number in total. Of that, about 19 million or so would be allocated to what we call the formula units, our institutions. Essentially, what that recommendation would do is fund the outcomes that have occurred in the last year based on the outcome-based formula. Now, there's some calculations in what that number would be that includes SREB salary assumptions and some various pieces and parts. but what they have recommended funding really relates pretty closely to the actual changes in deliverables, the outcomes that the outcome formula gives value to, degrees, persistence, other kinds of workforce contact hours, those kinds of outcomes. So we're very hopeful that that as the governor puts the budget together, that they'll find a way to fund THEC's recommendation, and we'll obviously be reporting back to you. We'll know more about that, I guess, the first week or so in February when the governor's budget will be unveiled. But we're hopeful right now. Funding Board is meeting tomorrow and again next week to determine revenue estimates. The process that they go through is to come up with consensus forecasts of what revenues are likely to be. Funding Board is constitutional officers and the Commissioner of Finance, and that will have a lot to do with the governor's ability to fund various kinds of needs and competing requirements for the budget. But based on year-to-date revenue, at least, things are feeling much better than they have in recent years. So there seems to be some hope for continued improvement in the economy in the state, and hopefully that translates then to better revenue estimates. That translates into the ability to make the investment in higher education that we certainly hope that they're able to do. And then finally, Ms. Chairman, and this is the final thing, the search processes that are going on right now. We're in the middle of a search at Vol State. Regent Thomas, Regent Copeland, Regent Gatz, and Regent Reynolds are the board members who are on that search committee. First committee for that is scheduled for December 15th. Interviews, tentatively, we would be looking probably around the week of February 27th to have the campus interview. So between now and then, the process will take place to try to come to a short list that would be invited back to the campus, and we would hope by the end of March at least to have named, to be in a position to recommend to you a new president at Ball State. To date, we got 16 applicants. We anticipate they've been coming in, kind of on a daily basis, so we'd anticipate even by the 15th that we'll have more. Probably by the second committee meeting, there'll be even more. So, so that one is underway. We're beginning the organizational phase of the Tennessee Tech search. As I think y'all know, Dr. Bell has indicated, despite repeated attempts on the part of your chancellor to talk him out of it, and those attempts are not over yet. So Bob, be prepared. He has announced that his intent to leave at the end of fiscal year, so June 30. So we are starting that search. We'll actually be running an advertisement, I think, Phyllis, next week in the Chronicle, and begin that process. Our tentative schedule would call for the first meeting of that search committee to be sometime mid-February, with trying to have identified a candidate in April, late April at the latest, to be in a position to move forward. We'll be using, absent any objection, we'll be using Greenwood Asher in that effort to help us. They were quite helpful at the ETSU search, and we think they can will also be able to do a great job for us at Tennessee Tech. I hope that's okay. The fact is, they've probably already been doing a little bit of work talking to people because it hadn't been a secret that this is going to happen. And then finally, at Tennessee State, our target is to have named a president by fall of next year, and then back up from that, and that kind of gives you an idea of when we'd be running advertisements and pursuing that. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, part of the expectation from Dr. Shields is that not only would she seek to address the accreditation issue, but also to really help make some operational changes at TSU that would better position the university to be kind of in the best possible shape as we seek a permanent president. So we want to give her time to continue those efforts and to really go through a couple of enrollment cycles to see if the things that we're doing are in fact improving. So that one will be close behind. Hopefully, those are the searches that we'll have to worry about for some time to come. But you never know what might happen. And we're in, the TTC process is ongoing right now at Murfreesboro and anticipated to, James, when are y'all going to talk about that in your, or?
We're looking at probably starting some on the 1st of February.
Okay. So that one is underway as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, pending any questions anybody might have or thoughts or comments, that would be my report.
Thank you, Chancellor Morgan. Any questions regarding the Chancellor's report? All righty. Hearing none, we will move to the reports of our presidents and directors, and the first I would call on Director Brad White for the report for the technology centers.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Duckett, Regents, Chancellor Morgan, and guests. They say confession is good for the soul. I've been married a long time and I've never got a chance to confess. She always found out first, but before coming up here this morning, since this is my first time, I was trying to make sure my tie was straight and no food on my sleeves, and my hair was parted straight, and everything looked right. And Dr. Perrier came up to me and asked if everything was okay. And I said, yeah, I'm just trying to get prepared and make sure everything's okay. And she said, you're sure? And I said, yes. And so May Perry, the director of Hartsville, came up and said, Brad, is everything all right? And I said, yeah, I'm just trying to get myself together for this meeting. And they said, so you're not nervous? I said, no, I've spoken to groups many times, and I'm a graduate of 3 TBR institutions, and I'm ready. And so they looked at each other and said, well, what are you doing in the ladies' restroom? So I might be a little nervous. We want to congratulate Carol on her appointment as Associate Vice Chancellor. All the directors are thrilled, except one. And that'd be the one who had to take her place up here since she's a new Associate Vice Chancellor. But we do want to congratulate her. Would also like to give our condolences to McMinnville Director Warren Locks on the loss of his mother, and to Mark Lenz, Nashville TTC Director, on the loss of his father this past week. So our thoughts and prayers are with them. Well, we've got a lot of people to congratulate. I want to, I guess some of the things are in your handout, but our TTC ROCE coordinator, Woody, as we call him, Richard Woodward, was awarded the TTC Faculty Member of the Decade. Now, I realize there's only 11 years in this decade, so he got all of them. He's a coordinator and won that award, and we want to congratulate him for all his help to the TTCs for the online programs. We'd also like to congratulate TTC staff members named the COE commissioners, and they will be on the COE, Commission on Occupational Education, through 2014. May Perry, Director at Hartsville, Dr. Myra West, Assistant Director at Livingston, and our own Vice Chancellor King for their appointment. It's good to have family to kind of keep us informed and help us as we go through these accreditation. And speaking of accreditation, the COE recognized 40 years of accreditation, and with that 40 years, there were 13 original schools that were accredited. back in 1971. And of that 13, 8 of them were TTCs. Athens, Crossville, Hartsville, Knoxville, Livingston, McKenzie, McMinnville, and Morristown. Not only were they the first to be accredited, they've maintained that accreditation for the last 40 years, and we want to congratulate them. I guess some of the big news is TTC Dixon broke ground November 16th on a 65,000 square foot expansion project. The $16 million project is scheduled to be completed in March of 2013 and will triple the available training capacity at the site. Regent Thomas, Vice Chancellor King, Vice Chancellor Gregory, as well as state reps Joe Pitts, Curtis Johnson, along with State Senator Tim Barnes, participated in that. It's exciting for us to know we're growing and that the board and the state is helping us grow with our need. We've had some, I guess, devastating news in West Tennessee with the closing of the Goodyear plant, 1,800 people without jobs. But we're not standing idly by. The Newbern School has opened up 2 industrial maintenance classes, a welding class and a nursing class, to help those displaced workers. McKenzie is opening a new green electronics class in January that will be completely Goodyear people. Jackson truck driving program, it was at Ripley and Crump. They consolidated to Jackson. Since Jeff Sisk has been the director there, they have also offered trucks and training in Union City for the Goodyear people that wanted some truck driving. All the schools in the area, besides adding new programs, and with the help of Mr. King getting additional funding to do those, our existing classes have been stretched to accommodate those people, but as far as we can tell so far, we have met their needs that they've asked us to do. TTC Ripley, proud to announce that Josh McBroom, computer information technology student, has been elected to serve as state officer with the Tennessee Skills USA. Josh has been active in the organization since January upon his enrollment. And it may be somewhat of a family tradition to serve. His mother, Sue McBroom, has served as coordinator of financial and human resources at Ripley for the past 16 years. So I guess it's just a family tradition there. Sean Murphy, who's a student at TTC Athens, participated in something I've never heard of, the Gunk Serious Solutions Challenge in Las Vegas. Now, when I first read that, I thought, what is that? And I'm still not sure, except that he won first place, received $3,500 scholarship, and received a $5,000 for his automotive tech program at Athens. I have an auto tech program. I'm gonna have to look into this challenge here. He was one of 5 finalists from across the nation to participate, and he won first place, so we want to congratulate him. Well, in closing, in some news in the last 10 years, Johnny Cash, Bob Hope, and Steve Jobs have all passed away. A think tank out of Washington took this information to see what impact it might have on the economy and what they could derive from it. And the results was no jobs, no cash, no hope. But the TTCs have our own means of personal research, and what we have discovered is that John O'Work, one of our TTC graduates, is working. That Jeremy Stepp said he made a step in the right direction by enrolling at the TTC. And Chuck Abel stated, through education and training, I'm able to work. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director White. Are there any questions of Director White? All right, thank you. Appreciate the report. Report for the community colleges, President Wade McCamey.
Thank you, Chairman Duckett. Thank you, Chairman Duckett. Chancellor.
Brad did that, by the way.
Chancellor Morgan, Regent members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the TBR Community Colleges, I would like to thank the following individuals for their support and guidance with a number of Tennessee Community College initiatives that have taken place since your last meeting. First, to Chairman Morgan, thank you, Chancellor Morgan, thank you for your leadership in putting together the Tennessee College Completion Academy that did provide an opportunity a few weeks ago, as you've already noted, for a number of community colleges to come together in a strategic planning session. And thank you also for the second round that will take place in March. To Vice Chancellor Warren Nichols, thank you for your leadership in providing an opportunity for us to examine a statewide marketing initiative. In this regard, Dr. Nichols, along with TBR Communications Director Monica Griffin-Watts and representatives with Level Communications, recently held regional meetings with community college presidents and marketing and communications staff from each institution. The meetings were information gathering and brainstorming sessions in support of efforts to develop a brand for the unified community college system. The development and implementation of a statewide community college system brand and a subsequent statewide marketing campaign should enhance our ability to better communicate the value of Tennessee community colleges. Additionally, I would also like to thank Vice Chancellor Nichols for his leadership in scheduling the community college presidents for a planning retreat in just a few weeks. This will take place in late January. To Vice Chancellor Dale Sims, thank you for your leadership in working with the community colleges on designing a new distribution formula that will guide the TBR in funding community colleges starting with the new appropriations year. To Vice Chancellor Paula Short, thank you for your leadership role in bringing Pearson to the table. This was a statewide initiative to examine not only new educational products, but new ways to enhance affordability for students, and there are more meetings to follow with other major vendors such as McGraw-Hill, Carnegie, and Cengage. The Vice Chancellor, James King. James, thank you for your leadership in working with community colleges in ways to enhance partnerships with Tennessee Technology Centers consistent with the Complete College Tennessee Act. To Vice Chancellor David Gregory, thank you for your role in leading the ad hoc committee on capital outlay and capital maintenance, which, as all of you know, is one of our lead upcoming legislative initiatives. So, David, wherever you are, the pressure is on. We're expecting great results. And even though Dr. Rhoda is not here today, we'd like to thank Dr. Rhoda and THEC for their leadership in working in the realm of developing a new outcomes funding formula, again mentioned previously by the Chancellor, in such a way that most community college presidents will finally be able to understand the major components that will hopefully result in greater rewards for institutional initiatives. And lastly, to Governor Bill Haslam, thank you for your willingness to examine a major bond initiative for funding capital outlay as well as capital maintenance projects for all TBR institutions. And in closing, in addition to the written community college report in front of you, I'm pleased to make the following announcement. 2 of your community colleges, for the first time ever, will be holding formal December graduations, Columbia State and Walter State. This will take place next week, and in that regard, we'd like to thank Regent Danny Varlin, who will be sharing the stage at Walter State, and to Regent Julius Johnson, who will share the stage at Columbia State with Dr. Smith. And lastly, to our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Paul Stanton, who, as each of you know, will be retiring in January. Best wishes in your new retirement role. All of you will agree that Paul and his lovely wife Nancy will truly be missed. I rode down the road too many times with him to not feel quite a bit of loss on this one. So, Paul, thank you for your years of tremendous service to East Tennessee State University. That concludes our report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McCamey. Are there any questions, Dr. McCamey, regarding the community president's report? Not. Thank you. Appreciate the excellent report. In the absence of President Sidney McPhee, who is actually in India, I would like to call on President Bob Bell for his report for the universities and to remind him of how important he is to to this organization, and that you just don't want to give up that opportunity to continue to work with us. President Bell.
Well, good afternoon again. The answer is still no.
I tried.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here with you, to greet you on behalf of the university presidents, and we want to start our report by congratulating Paul Stanton on a phenomenal success, a phenomenal career at East Tennessee State. And Paul, you've been part of the family a long time, and we will certainly all miss you in these coming years. But again, congratulations on wonderful service. Each of your universities is aggressively pursuing strategies to address the Complete College Act and to better serve our students and our citizens in this great state of Tennessee. You've heard some of that already today, and you will hear more about that as your meeting progresses. As the Chancellor mentioned, several of our universities and our community colleges attended the College Completion Academy, the first of those completion academies. And this was truly a great opportunity and a stimulating opportunity to think about leading edge approaches to improving retention and graduation rates, finding ways to sort of rethink how we approach our students. And I think these academies are going to lead to a profound change on many of our campuses. I think one of the really fun things that many of us concluded is that we simply need to take the model of the Completion Academy and take it down to the college campuses and replicate it there and keep that conversation going. So it is a tremendously valuable academy, and we certainly thank the board for sponsoring that and for helping us get a chance to visit with some world-class leaders and see some benchmarking at other places that brings new ideas to the table. You have in front of you our High Signs newsletter. I will just point out a couple of things in it from each campus. Certainly at East Tennessee State, we celebrate their honor for the Campus Sustainability Award that they have received. They've made some remarkable steps in that area and have been recognized nationally for it. At MTSU, we celebrate the publicity focus on the arts, and we also note the great collaborations that have been announced with Dyersburg State and with Motlow State community colleges. At Tennessee State, we certainly want to add our congratulations to President Shields and to the entire TSU faculty and staff on their recent accreditation. I was in Orlando when those decisions were made, and it was a great celebration for a great university. We'd also remind you in the newsletter the note that TSU ranks in the top 20 HBCUs in this year's Best Colleges list, and also that they have earned a major award in Homeland Security Scientific Leadership. At Tennessee Tech, U.S. News and World Report recently recognized Tech as producing graduates who leave the campus with the lowest debt load in the South. And that's a tribute to the work of a lot of people and also to the very hard work of our students in maintaining and supporting themselves as they go through college. We also would note that Tech was invited to be a part of the President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge Council in Washington, D.C., and we look forward to great things happening as a result of that. At the University of Memphis, there is an ongoing capital campaign, part of the celebration of the centennial, and there's a great write-up in your report on that, and I hope you pay attention to those cats that they've let out of the bag. The tigers really look phenomenal in that report. At Austin Peay, the university has launched 2 new minors in technology, one in mobile technologies and one in web technologies, and they also have announced a major grant in fuel cell research. A lot of activities going on all of our campuses, a lot of things to celebrate. We invite you to come to the campus anytime that you can, and we thank you, all of you who have visited our campuses, for spending time with us, for expressing your interest, and for learning more about the great things that are going on. Thank you, and happy holidays to each of you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Are there any questions of Dr. Bell regarding the university's report?
Please, someone give me a question about MTSU. I don't get this opportunity often. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is our unfinished business, and the first item on the under unfinished business is our consent agenda, and you have received the materials presented today under today's consent agenda. Today, you have the opportunity to ratify all items on the consent agenda without discussion. If any member wants to discuss a particular item, you may request that that item now be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Does anyone have a request for any item that is currently listed on the consent agenda to be removed from it? If not, we will proceed, and items under the consent agenda under new business are the approval of TBR policy 2.01.01.00, approval of academic programs, units, and modifications. Are there any questions regarding that? Next item is item 2, which is proposed program termination, modifications, and new technical programs implementations for the Tennessee Technology Centers. Any questions regarding that? Third item is the suggested revisions to our policy 3.04.01.00, student scholarships, grants, loans, and financial aid programs. Do we have any questions from any regent regarding that item? Last, we have our out-of-state tuition waiver request for East Tennessee State University and Walter State Community College. Again, I ask, are there any questions from members of the Regent regarding that? Hearing none, a motion to accept these 4 items as being approved by way of the consent agenda would be appropriate. Is there a motion by a member of the Regent? So moved. Motion by Regent Montgomery. Second by Regent Roddy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. That item, or those items are approved. We now move to new business, and the first item I would just acknowledge under new business would be the request that was made by Regent Roddy that we formally send Dr. Shields and the staff at Tennessee State University a letter acknowledging their unconditioned accreditation that they recently received, and unless there is any objection from any member, Chancellor Morgan, who just now got a pay increase from that of a regent to back to that of the chancellor, would put together the letter and forward it to Dr. Shields and her team. Thank you. Next is informational reporting, and I will acknowledge that these items presented in this portion of the agenda are for informational purposes only, and no action is required by the board on these items. Materials for the following items have been supplied to all board members. I will note that agenda items 1 and 2, financial report overview, and the annual report on private fundraising, they are written reports, and if anyone has any questions regarding those reports, let me know or signify at this time. Items 3 and 4, those are verbal reports, and Vice Chancellor Wendy Thompson will come forth and give us that report.
Thank you, Regent Duckett. The first report is on the use of ARRA and stimulus funds, and Regent Roddy told me that he had read it, and so I offered to yield this time to him to do this report. But I wanted to take an opportunity to talk with you guys about this unique opportunity that we had with these special funds, and it was an opportunity that allowed us to be nimble in a lot of ways. And I want to first thank the directors and the presidents who took the opportunity to use these funds and did a tremendous job in doing so. We had approximately $2.6 million available to us from a combination of federal ARRA and state appropriations between 2008 and 10-11, and the broad objective for use of these funds was to mitigate against the rising cost of tuition. And we thought about what that meant, and we decided that the best way to mitigate against rising costs of tuitions is to get in and get out as quickly as possible. And so that was one of our overarching goals, is to do things that would allow students to do that. Over half of the funds that we used were allocated for scholarships, so they went directly to students. For universities and community colleges, we had a few stipulations. The first was that the funds had to be used for populations that had been identified in the diversity plans, and that preference had to be given to students who qualified for need-based aid. Some examples of the types of programs at the colleges and universities were summer term scholarships, scholarships for students who were eligible for completer programs. That's students who were identified as having just a few credits that they needed in order to complete. Last dollar scholarships for students who could complete by summer of August 2011. And then support programs that were designed to target students who were trying to complete a program of study. The funds were available to be used primarily on a reimbursement basis, and we utilized 82% of the available funds. A little bit about the types of programs we did and the impact that they had. The Chancellor has already reported on the first Completion Academy, and that was one of the programs that was funded in the system-wide program for the use of these funds. And Brad White talked a little bit about the Goodyear plant closing, and we utilized funds for displaced workers programs. One was in Scott County, and that was with the closing of the Armstrong plant. Scott County was served by the TTC Oneida Huntsville. Special programs were created and marketed to the workers who were displaced at the Armstrong plant. And then in Perry County, with the closing of the Fisher plant, we had a collaborative effort of the TTCs in the area and the community colleges in the area. And for the TTC programs, most of the TTCs participated in a program that was designed to fill in the gaps of GED programs. And this allowed students to be eligible to enter into TTC programs and to complete them at a quicker rate. Other TTCs provided tutoring and support or created whole new programs that serve students in their areas. The university and community college programs impacted over 1,100 students. 86% of the students that were served at university or community colleges through these stimulus funds were either retained or graduated as a result of the funds that were used for them. Some examples of those programs were that at TSU, they targeted non-traditional students who were in danger of stopping out. 60 students received funding. 54 of those students graduated, and one is scheduled to graduate this December. So that was a 92% success rate in that program. TSU also had an Accelerate and Academic Boot Camp program the summer before students were supposed to start their freshman year, and 97 students participated in that, and 84 began the fall semester, which was an 87% success rate for that program. Northeast State did a Veterans Summer Learning Support Program. The veterans were not eligible to get financial aid for summer programs, and they funded 31 veterans, and they've retained 100% of those students. Pellissippi State identified students in their Access and Diversity program with 45 or more credits and required them to meet with a counselor and complete an academic plan. 88 students received funding, and 92% of those students, 81 of them, graduated or are still on track to graduate. And in Pellissippi State's report, they included some personal information about the types of students who were impacted. And you started that. I just included a few of those examples for you so you could see how successful our campuses were in utilizing these funds that were available to them. And I know they were grateful to have this funding for targeted programs, but I think the students were probably more grateful. And so I want to thank the presidents and directors who participated. And that's the end of that report. Questions?
Any questions on the final report of Access and Diversity Stimulus Funded programs?
Should we go
Hearing none.
sit down and come back?
We'll move to the next item, completion review process.
Okay, at the board retreat in the spring, Chancellor Morgan and I gave you a brief overview about a means by which we can consistently review progress towards achieving goals we set and you set regarding completion. And then a little bit over a month ago, Chancellor Morgan established a unit of 4 central office employees, including myself, each of whom would dedicate a portion of their time to work on this dedicated effort. And today, I just want to give you a little overview on how the process will work and an idea of the type of activities that the unit will engage in. But first, let me introduce you to the 3 other members of the unit. I don't know if Dr. Berriman's here. She's here. Treva Berriman is Associate Vice Chancellor in Academic Affairs. She's been with the central office, I think, for about 13 years, working for Dr. Short. Catherine Middlebrooks works with me in Access and Diversity and does data and assessment work. And Deanna Stacy coordinates special programs and is administrative support in the Office of Access and Diversity. Thanks. So for an overview of what we're trying to accomplish and a few examples of the types of activities we'll engage in. First of all, we hear the words completion agenda quite often. And we know what a completion agenda is, and probably the average person reading a newspaper has heard that completion is sort of the new focus in higher education. But I'm not sure we've exactly talked about what we mean when we say the completion agenda. And so because we are 2 hours away from lunch, I thought I'd do a little interactive activity to stimulate your brains a little bit and to give me a sense of what your thoughts are on this topic. So there should be an index card near your microphone or somewhere near you. And I'm just going to ask you to do something pretty quickly. If you would take about 15 seconds to just, in 5 words or less, jot down what is the TBR completion agenda. Doesn't have to be a sentence, just stream of consciousness. What do you think that means? And don't put your name on it, and I'll collect them afterwards. This is just to help me help you. And then take another 15 seconds to write down, how will you know if we succeed at it? There are no prizes, there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer, but it's just for me to be able to gather the different thoughts about something that we talk about a lot. But let's take a step back. There's been a lot of work going on through the strategic planning process that focuses on student success, program quality, as well as other goals and objectives. And these are all major components of any completion agenda. There are also major initiatives at the national level. First in the world, for instance, focuses on degree production. Complete College Tennessee Act, a major statewide focus on degree production. And business and industry has even become interested in completion as it relates to producing an educated workforce for Tennessee. And there have been and continue to be a plethora of student success and completion initiatives at the campus and system levels. All can be part of a completion agenda. So one question we might ask is, how do all of these, and how with all of these activities, initiatives, movements going on, do we know what we should focus on? What do you as a board need to measure to be sure that the work that we're doing is achieving the overall completion goals we've set for ourselves? And what exactly is that goal? Well, it starts with asking 5 questions over and over. What are we trying to do? How are we trying to do it? How do we know when we're succeeding? If we're not succeeding, how will we change things? And then the completion delivery unit's question is, how can we help? That's what we will keep asking and doing on a continuous basis. By asking and answering these questions, we can help to focus on what we think are the 3 main components of a completion agenda for higher education. The first is student success. Second is increased educational attainment. And third is providing an educated workforce for the state of Tennessee. As I mentioned, we constantly ask the 5 basic questions, and how will we do this? One of the first major activities that the unit is engaged in is answering the first question: what is our overarching goal? It seems like an easy question, but you just tried to answer it, and I'll be interested to see what you've said. But consider this: the 3 major public guiding documents each have different timelines, each have different assumptions, each emphasize different degree and credentials, each builds on the other in some way. So the question is, for the Tennessee Board of Regents, what do we want to achieve? The first step is to identify the overarching goal for completion. So what the CDU is doing is we're analyzing all of the major initiatives, including goals and objectives contained within them. We're working with the chancellor, and we're going to produce and articulate a system aspiration that identifies the what we hope to achieve, by when, and what we will measure to make sure that we succeed. One other area of focus for the unit is to determine whether we have the capacity to track and forecast based on data at any given point in time. In order to be able to answer the next three questions, where are we now, where will we be tomorrow, next year, are we on target to reach our goal, we have to know that the right people have access to the right data at the right time. And so another series of activities that the unit has started is to help provide information to system and campus personnel to determine what our data needs and capabilities are. Once the aspiration has been set and we know that we're capable of tracking progress, the work will then shift to assisting where needed at the system campus level to assess progress, make adjustments, and then report out to the chancellor and to you on that progress. It's important to remember that the unit acts in a support role. We support the chancellor in keeping up with progress. We support you. We support campus and system office goal leaders. And it's also important to note that this is not added work for anyone other than members of the unit. We actually assist in making sure that the work that's already is being done is the right type of work, and where we can help determine what the right type of work is, we will do that. So this overview gives you just a little bit of information into what the completion delivery unit is and the types of activities that it engages in, and what you can expect in the future is to hear specific reports on where the system is progressing towards specific goals and benchmarks. Any questions?
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Thompson. Are there any questions by any members? Are we supposed to leave our cards
I would
here at
love
our
that.
place?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As I indicated at the start of this segment, these were informational items and no formal action was needed. However, before we move to the portion of new business that will require action by the Board of Regents, I would call back on Chancellor Morgan to give an update on an issue that he had spoken with me independently, as well as Regent Griscom, that we think it's appropriate and important for you as regents to at least be aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I had intended to mention this earlier, and I didn't. So thank you for the opportunity to come back to this. One of the things that y'all may remember from our November 15th Audit Committee meeting, the Audit Committee met in advance of the chair's meeting, was a conversation really around the audit that had been done, the internal audit that had been done at the University of Memphis Athletic Department. There were issues raised in that audit relative to whether or not expenditures and reimbursements were being carefully approved or carefully considered by management before payments were being made. There were some related issues around policies, procedures, and so forth. Out of that discussion, a question was asked in the course of the meeting. Chairman Griscom asked the question, well, how does the athletic department financial operation at the University of Memphis relate to the university-wide financial operation? the answer that I think technically came back after the audit committee meeting had finished was, well, there's really no ongoing operational relationship between the two financial management units. Well, given that question and the conversation really around that audit, it seemed to me, and I talked with the chairman and Chairman Griscom about this, and they concurred that it would be a good idea to ask our internal audit staff here, Tammy and her staff, to collaborate with the internal audit folks at Memphis, really around the idea of, should there be a different relationship? Should the structure be different in terms of the financial operations of the athletic department? So I have asked Tammy to undertake that review. It's not really an audit. Now, some of you may know that the athletic director has announced his retirement effective, I think, David, June 30th, 2012. So there'll be additional audit activities kind of in connection with that, what's called a closeout audit to facilitate a new AD coming in soon at or about that time. So there'll be continued audit work being done in the athletic department, but this was really more thinking structurally about what is the right structure. Whether the athletic department's financial activities ought to be folded into the Vice President for Business Finance operation, whether perhaps there ought to be a dual reporting relationship, or any number of other possibilities about things that could be done to ensure that the integrity of the financial operations of the athletic department. Some of y'all will know, John, that part of the NCAA issues back from 2 or 3 years ago were around some, part of it was about testing of an athlete, but part of it was about kind of inadvertent kinds of mistakes that were made in the payment processes and so forth. So it's important, I think, that we take this opportunity to get folks to look at it and just see what they think maybe should be considered. I mean, it'd be the university that'll determine kind of how to organize that business, but we thought this was a good chance to take a look at that, and just want to let you know that something is coming from the conversation that we had in the audit committee back a couple weeks ago.
Chancellor, how does Memphis' organization differ from our other universities?
I don't know about the other universities. I know that, or I don't know about all the universities. I do know that at Middle there is a dual reporting relationship. I think the financial management folks who are in the athletic department, but they also have a reporting relationship with John Cawthorn, who is here, I think, and that's, if I described that correctly, John. I'm not sure about the others, but so we know that there are some different models out there that perhaps should be considered. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chancellor. We just felt it was at least important that you as members understood that, A, there was follow-up, and the nature of the follow-up that was underway. Moving back to the actual agenda on new business that requires action. The first item is the fiscal year 2011-2012 October revised budget, and I will call on Vice Chancellor Sims to come forth and give us our presentation and our lovely numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I will try to keep this as short as possible. Wendy, her interactive thing, what I'd like to do is start off. I'm going to give you a series of 40 numbers if you'll jot them down. No, seriously. I am here to present to you the revised budget for 2011-12. Just as a reminder, we have 3 budget cycles. We have the proposed cycle, which is the original operating budget that you act on in June. This is the second cycle, which is a revision to the proposed budgets. And then the last cycle is our estimated, which is our final budget for the year that you act on in June of every year as our fiscal year is closing. The reason that we primarily have a revised budget cycle is, I think as we've discussed before, campuses prepare their proposed budget in April.
So they're preparing their proposed budget before they know what action the governor and the General Assembly will take on state appropriations. They do not know what their fall enrollment will look like, and they also don't know with any finality what maintenance fee recommendation the board may or may not adopt. So those are items that are missing when they recommend a budget to you and we transmit that to you. So these are revisions from that. As we walk through this, you'll see comparisons of the revised budget proposal to the proposed budget that you adopted in June. Once you act on a budget, we transmit that to the Higher Education Commission. They consider these budget recommendations or budget actions and then ultimately transmit those to the administration for inclusion in the state budget. If we can back up one, I think. That state appropriation reconciliation, thank you. This is just reconciling the July budget appropriation of $597 million to the October revised. The biggest item in here, really the material item, most of you will recall the governor had recommended $10 million for the Memphis Research Consortium. That had originally been proposed as an appropriation to the University of Memphis on behalf of that consortium. In finalizing the state budget, that was made an appropriation to the Department of Economic and Community Development. So part of the process here is to recognize that change. So in essence, we have a $9.5 million reduction from our July proposed budget in terms of state appropriations. If there aren't any questions on that page, the next page we'll look at our total revenues and compare our revised and proposed budgets there. The most important thing that could be on this slide that's not on this slide is kind of what's missing. The state appropriation number, you see a small adjustment there that corresponds to the number we just reviewed. What's missing there, frankly, is that this is the first full fiscal year where we do not benefit from federal stimulus money or non-recurring state money. In fiscal 2008, our state money was a little over $754 million. You see this year our revised budget is $588 million. That's a decrease of over 22% between these two periods of time. So we are in kind of the cliff period. We have, to the extent that we had a glide path, we are now should have our wings level and be cruising along. In terms of student fees, you'll note that there's been a small adjustment upward, 4% adjustment upward in terms of maintenance fees and tuition. That's primarily the result of budgets in April being prepared on assuming a 5% increase in maintenance fees. The actual board action was north of that. You'll recall 8.8% to 10% at our universities and 9.5% at our community colleges and technology centers. So the adjustment here is consistent with that action. If there aren't any questions on that at a high level, that will give you our revenue picture. In essence, we're still operating on a $2.7 billion revenue budget. The next slide, and I won't dwell on this one, is a graphic presentation of that. What you can clearly see is that in terms of tuition and fees, that becomes a larger share, granted by a small amount, but a larger share than our state appropriation is. State appropriation is a share of total going down. Tuition and fees is a share going up. The other shares are relatively constant between the periods. The next item we'll look at are expenditures by functions. Again, proposed to revised. One of the things, you always worry about how many decimal points to put in something, and we elected no decimal points here. I want to clarify the instruction line there where it would appear that we're moving from 50% of our money in instruction to 49%. That's really a rounding item. The real numbers there in the proposed budget were about 49.9%. The revised budget is 49.4, blah, blah, blah. So it's really a very minor adjustment there. And frankly, the revised budget as a share of our total in instruction is consistent with our budgets over time. If you looked at this same budget last year, it was 49.4% of our spend. Some of the adjustments, again, look a little extraordinary. Research is an example, a 33% adjustment there. It's $13 million. Over almost $12 million of that is accounted for at the University of Memphis, MTSU, ETSU, and TSU. MTSU, a little over $4 million, is the startup of a new program, the Center for Botanical Research. I hope I said that right, John. The other item at TSU is $4.4 million. It's funding for development of a research greenhouse in their ag research area. Again, that accounts for the vast majority of that adjustment. The next item in terms of public service, again, a 42% adjustment, $8.6 million. The lion's share of that is at TSU, where their cooperative extension service, it is really a public service of the university. They're participating in this research greenhouse development, and that number is reflected within this public service number, about $4.9 million. The last item I'll note on this page is a scholarship and fellowship increase of 12%. That is largely a function that when our maintenance fees and out-of-state tuition increase, the cost of continuing to meet existing scholarship obligations goes up basically in lockstep. So continuing to fulfill scholarship activities drives that number roughly in the same percentages as our maintenance fee and tuition increases go up. Mr. Chair, if there aren't any questions, the next page, as you're thinking about that, again, is a look at a pie chart comparing the two periods of time. When you look at instruction, research, and public service, you can see that we're over 55%, kind of traditional academic enterprise. I should add academic support there as well. So we're over 60% of our spend really is within the academic area. If there aren't any questions there, the next cut we'll take at this next look is by purpose, so to speak, natural classification. As we've talked before, 60 to 70% of our spend is in people. Particularly given that the board authorized salary adjustments last year, that spend is up a little bit, as you might imagine. It's still consistent with past years in terms of the share of our total spend that goes towards salary and benefits. The travel is up by 6%. One thing that I will note for you, if you looked at the revised budget that you adopted last year, the same time, this number of $25 million in this revised budget is about 5% less than the number last year. So while it looks like an increase over our proposed, it's really in actuality year over year is a smaller number. The operating is essentially catches everything else. It includes items like the scholarship expense that we just mentioned in terms of our functions. It captures our maintenance and operation, things like utilities and minor repairs, those sorts of things. Again, that number looking year over year as opposed to proposed budget to revised, if you look year over year, that number is up a little over 3%, not a full 20%. So it is consistent with our level of budgeting over the last several years. Capital outlay, again, is a big increase from what institutions thought they could do in the July proposed budget. What I'll note for you is that is almost a 23% decrease from this same budget last year. Really, again, is a reflection of the absence of state non-recurring money coming into our budgets. Those dollars have been used during our glide path period primarily to do capital work, particularly work focused on energy efficiency, sort of projects that would contain long-term savings for the system. The next, again, is a look at a pie chart. Again, you've seen the numbers and the percentages are relatively consistent with what we would have seen 5 or 6 years ago as well. The next slide, and really the last one before we get to the action that we'll be requesting that the board take, this is transfer activity. These are monies that move either into these reserve funds or accounts, or money that is being transferred from those reserve accounts back into our unrestricted E&G budgets, into the main budget for institutions. This is a roll-up of every institution. I probably should have started that to say that as well. So it's hard to identify any particular item that drives these. these particular numbers. Word of explanation, retirement of indebtedness is exactly that. Those are transfers. We require institutions to transfer monies required for paying debt service on state obligations or other obligations. They have to transfer that to their retirement of indebtedness fund. So this $29 million is that current estimate of what that requirement would be for this year. Unexpended plan is money that's accumulated to do basically renovation and building work on our campuses. This reflects a transfer from those funds back into E&G revenues. Renewal and replacement is about equipment, tangible property, think vehicles, and again, laboratory equipment, those kinds of things. Other is a range of miscellaneous items. It transfers from quasi-endowments into the operation of the institution or out of those operation of institutions into those funds. When you get to the bottom line, $20 million, just again for comparison purposes, the budget last year that we were looking at where we had much more in the way of non-recurring money in the budget, that number was almost $84 million. So a significant downward adjustment in the amount of funds transfer activity occurring in the revised budget that we're looking at. The last page here is basically a roll-up. It corresponds to the information that we've gone over briefly. It also ties back to the presentation, the more detailed information that you had within your board books, the 30 or so pages of institutional information. Essentially, we're operating on a $2.8 billion budget with about 17,000 in round number positions. It's the staff, and I want to compliment both the financial staffs at our institutions who have done a good job through this process again, and I want to compliment Renee Stewart, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Finance, and her staff in their review of this. We have reviewed the proposals by the institutions and find that they're in compliance with board guidelines. And that considering all of the revenues and expenses of the institutions in the system, that the budget before you is recommended as being balanced. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to respond to questions that members might have.
Okay. Does any Regent have a question for Vice Chancellor Sims? Excellent presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must have answered all the questions, or it's so confusing that nobody can
No.
think of a question. But either way, I'll take it.
Thank you. You've heard the report from Vice Chancellor Sims regarding the revised October 2011-2012 budget. Is there a motion to approve the report as presented in the budget?
So moved.
Moved by Regent Thomas. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Regent Kisper. This is a financial matter which requires a roll call vote. I would ask our secretary to call the roll, please.
Regent Copeland.
Aye.
Regent Duckett.
Aye.
Regent Kisber.
Aye.
Regent Ferris.
Aye.
Regent Gatz.
Aye.
Regent Griscom.
Aye.
Regent Huffman.
Aye.
Regent Johnson.
Aye.
Regent Markham. Regent Montgomery.
Aye.
Regent Reynolds. Regent Roddy.
Aye.
Regent Thomas.
Aye.
Regent Varlin. Regent Weeks.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next item is the board approval of institutional student disciplinary policies. I would call on Vice Chancellor Short, and before you start making your presentation, I was given a note that they have corrected the cable, so if you could readjust the mic, pull it a little closer towards you for the...
Is it going to bark at me? It scared me to death a few minutes ago.
If so, it's not my fault.
That's right. All right. I would never blame you.
All righty, thank you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon to all of you. We have an action item for you, approval of the institutional student disciplinary policies. You recall that in March at our board meeting, you approved the revision of the system-wide student rules and the simultaneous repeal of the individual institutional student rules. A requirement of our revised system-wide rule is that each of our institutions, our 6 universities, our 13 community colleges, and our TTCs as a single entity, prepare and submit to the board for your approval institutional disciplinary policies. Each institution's policy must align with the system-wide rule which you approved in March. So our campuses have been very busy. Each campus, plus the TTCs as a single entity, have developed and have submitted to the board for review disciplinary policies. They have been reviewed by the Office of General Counsel as well as the Office of Academic Affairs, and I would be remiss if I did not point out to you the hard work of 2 individuals in particular in this process. Dr. Randy Schulte, who is in my office as Assistant Vice Chancellor. Randy, are you here? There's Randy. Yeah. And Don Ungrath from Chris Modisher's office. Both have done an incredible job reviewing all 20 policies, providing feedback to the campuses, and then reporting to Chris and to me. So you have copies of each of those 20 student disciplinary policies that are included in your online electronic board book. So today, upon your approval of these 20 disciplinary policies, they will go into effect on the effective date of the revised system-wide rule, which is January 29th, 2012. So I put these before you today for your approval.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Short. You've heard the recommendation that the 20 student disciplinary policies that we have received in our packet be approved. Is there a motion by Regent to approve the policies? Moved by Regent Varlin. Is there a second? Second by Regent Farland. This is an item that requires a Fran, I'm sorry. Markham, I said Farland.
Okay,
I apologize.
got it. Thanks.
Yeah. This is an item that requires a roll call vote. I'll call on Chris Modisher to call the roll.
Regent Copeland.
Aye.
Regent Duckett.
Aye.
Regent Kisber.
Aye.
Regent Ferris. Regent Gatz. Regent Griscom. Regent Huffman. Regent Johnson. Regent Markham. Regent Montgomery. Regent Reynolds. Regent Roddy. Regent Thomas. Regent Varlin. Regent Weeks. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Next item on the agenda is the 2012 system-wide legislative initiatives. I will call on Vice Chancellor Gregory to give us an update.
And thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and good afternoon to the members of the Regents. And realize I'm being redundant, Dr. Stanton, but I just want to add, if I can, on top of the things that have been said already. What a great privilege it's been to be your friend, and you will be certainly missed as a part of the Board of Regents system. With that, Mr. Chairman, let me just give a little bit of background to this item. It has been the custom of the board now for the last 10 to 15 years that I'm aware of that the legislative agenda items for the board be presented at this particular meeting and become an action item of the board. It represents to you really the non-monetary items that we will be pursuing legislative action on. You've heard Dr. McCamey say one of the major initiatives will be the support of the governor's capital improvement program, and we look forward to being able to do that. What I will walk through with you are the initiatives you'll see on the slides. Also, you're receiving at your place now, and the presidents and directors will receive the agenda. It will become the action of this board should you favorably do so. With that, then, the first item is actually a bill that we will work to try to defeat yet again, and this has to do with guns on campus. And Dr. Nichols observed on the way down here, and unfortunately Virginia Tech apparently is today experiencing again an active shooter situation on their campus. I'm sorry to report that. Looks like there's been a police officer shot and then maybe one other. The issue of violence on campus is a very, very serious issue. I'd like to tell you that you have across the system a set of dedicated police and security folks. It's been my pleasure to work with people like Jack Cottrell at East Tennessee State University, Buddy Peaster at MTSU, Bruce Harbor at University of Memphis. These people are really outstanding people, very well-trained people, and to a man, they think that it is the right decision of the board and of higher education institutions to oppose having additional firearms on campuses. So we will continue, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regents, to oppose this type of legislation. We've seen it introduced in 23 states across the country. I think it will continue to be an item of continuing discussion as we go through the next few years. On then to the items that we will work to pass. I think so far in each of my meetings with Chancellor Morgan, as I leave, he reminds me, what are you doing in support of the completion agenda? And so you have to kind of squint your eyes at these, but I hope that you will see that the kinds of things that we bring forward, even in this agenda, help to free up and strengthen the system as we move towards the completion agenda. This first item is actually an item that came out of our March retreat. Those regents who were present will remember the discussion about the feasibility of adding an additional student regent as well as an additional faculty regent to this board. The purpose of that would be to just to strengthen the knowledge and depth of our board. As the statute currently is constructed, a faculty member comes onto the board with a one-year term, as does a student member, and you all have experienced the amount of work and information that is thrown your way and that you're asked to digest. So the proposal would be to align our board with the UT board, the THEC board, and have 2 regent faculty members, 2 regent student members, and allow the only one of those members to be a voting member. So you come on and you observe for your first year, and the second year you become a voting member. The second item, yes, sure.
Can we interrupt and ask a question?
Absolutely, please.
What would happen if the first year of a student, he's a senior? Has that been considered? Does he continue to serve even though he's graduated?
I suppose it would be how we would draft the statute. Currently, the statute is drafted in such a way that you must be a member of a TBR institution. So we could draft the statute such that if a person started their term and continued on, that they could do that and would not actually, if they started as a member and were a member when they were first appointed, they could continue on. Or we could simply leave the statute as it is. In that case, that person would unfortunately roll off. I suspect we'll do the former and allow that person to continue to serve. So if a person, let's take Mr. Gatz, for instance, if he were a senior and at the time he was appointed was a regent, was a member of a regent school and continued on in his appointment, he could continue to serve.
As not a student?
As not a student.
That would be my preference.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please, anybody, please interrupt as we go. The second has to do with access to teacher effect data. Regent Huffman, thank you for, Stephen Smith has been valuable to us as we've started down this discussion. The background of this issue has to do with the Higher Education Commission's charge under a grant from the Department of Education to evaluate our teacher education programs. They have done that for the first time this year, and Dr. Short, as all of you know, is leading an effort in the Ready to Teach program to improve our teacher education programs. What this legislative change in essence does is allows us to be able to see the data that goes in behind the scores so that we can ascertain the basis of the scores as well as use the data to help improve our teacher education programs. The next issue has to do with blind vending services. And if I might give a piece of background for those of you who've been around public service for a long time, you'll understand that many, many years ago, preference has been given to blind vendors in state office buildings as well as institutions of higher education. We have encountered some difficulties in working with the Tennessee Blind Enterprise as we particularly move forward into new and innovative type spaces for students in particular, food vending services, student centers, and those kind of things. We have been in discussions with the blind vending services over the past year, and those those discussions at this point have sort of reached an impasse. And we would like to ask the legislature if they would be willing to consider removing the higher education institutions from the vending preferences of blind vendors. Next, this issue came to us through the TBR Faculty Subcouncil. Please forgive my heading there. If you read it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is to correct an omission to statutory remedies regarding teacher tenure. And again, this came up to us initially through the ETSU Faculty Senate as well as the TBR Faculty Subcouncil, and it relates to a decision that the Supreme Court had regarding TBR versus Wells. And in that tenure termination decision, absent from the judicial remedy was the ability to award back pay. And so the faculty has asked us to consider changing the statute such that in the future, if there were a wrongful tenure termination case, the judge would at least have at their discretion the ability to award back pay. This next one, and for those of you who have been a part of the committee chairs meeting, this is new to you, so I'd like to point that out that you may be seeing this for the first time. This relates to the chickenpox immunization, Regent Roddy. And in 2009, the Tennessee Department of Health promulgated a set of rules that required our institutions to require students to show proof of immunization of varicella prior to enrollment. And this has become a particularly difficult thing for us to do, particularly at community colleges and particularly with adult students who have difficulty going back and providing their immunization records. This is currently a rule of the Board of Health, but we would like to ask the General Assembly to consider eliminating the requirement that the student has to show this proof before we can enroll them at any of our institutions, universities, community colleges, or technology centers. Next is a series of housekeeping measures. Those of you will remember last year's legislative session when the legislature attempting to address a situation that happened at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga campus required us to have background checks for all resident assistants, people working in our dormitories, as well as people who have access to keys in our dormitories. The legislation requires these individuals to pay for their background checks. And we have several of our institutions, a number of our institutions, who are providing background checks for all employees and paying for them. Not all of them, but many of our institutions are doing that. So it's set up sort of two different classifications now. If an employee is hired, I don't know if this is an institution to do it. I'll just pick on ETSU since I see Dr. Stanton over there. If they're requiring background checks for all their employees, the institution's paying for it. When it comes to an RA or a janitor, they have to make them pay for the background check. So it's really inconsistent, and we're going to try to seek some legislative relief that would allow us to pay for the background checks, both for the resident assistants as well as the staff that has access to the dorms. We don't get great pools sometimes for RAs, and we don't pay them a lot of money. And if you make them pay for their background check, that makes that equation even worse. And this is a bit of an arcane issue, but let me explain separate longevity payments. A couple of years ago, the State Employees Association passed some legislation that would, upon an individual employee's request, allow for separate checks for longevity. And at the time, our banner system would not accommodate that. What our banner system will accommodate is an institution to choose whether or not the regular paycheck, payroll check, and the longevity check are joined, or whether or not they're separate for everybody on that campus, but it will not allow for individuals to do that. We gave ourselves a couple of years to see if maybe that could be changed in base banner, and it has not. And so we're just going back to the legislature and asking them, would they consider exempting us from this requirement? I would tell you we've done a pretty good bit of talking to the individual campuses. We don't get a lot of requests from individuals to have separate longevity payments. So we don't really think, I hate to say it's not an issue anywhere, any place, but this is a very, very minor issue, we believe. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regents, there are some reporting requirements that we continue to kind of look at to see whether or not we might be able to seek relief from the legislature on certain reporting. Let me give you two. One that you're very familiar with is there's a requirement on notification to the Secretary of State's office within a certain period of time every time we do an electronic board meeting, a telephonic board meeting. And I think the purposes for that don't exist. I think we certainly give public notice to every board meeting that we host, and so this seems to be an extraneous requirement. Another example of outdated reporting requirements, legislature passed a bill a couple of years ago that asked our institutions to reduce their fuel consumption and look at alternative fuels. They have done that. They have filed those plans. But then there's sort of this carry-on reporting requirement that moves year after year and has become burdensome for our institutions. So we're going to ask for some legislative relief on that requirement as well. Mr. Chairman, that completes my report on legislative agenda items for 2012.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Gregory. I will ask, are there questions? Regent Griscom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be in one of these legislative sessions tomorrow, and so I'm looking for a little guidance, and that is on the issue that's starting to come up. There's been at least a hearing on the Senate side on lottery changes. I'm looking for guidance because I cannot anticipate getting through that session tomorrow without being asked, what does the Board of Regents think about modifications to the lottery program? So I would appreciate any guidance that you all could provide. Or otherwise just say, I don't know, which is okay as well.
Chancellor, you start, or you want me to?
You go ahead, and then I want to add something.
Let me try to put this in. It is a great question, by the way, timely question. To put it in context, the legislature has appointed a lottery stabilization task force. It is working on the Senate side only, not on the House side. So it's a Senate committee, but it is comprised of higher education officials. So we've had seats at the table, as well as the constitutional officers. The problem for which they are attempting to solve is about a $20 million recurring problem in lottery revenues. At the end of the last session, the House moved a bill that would require initial lottery recipients to meet both criteria, both the ACT as well as the GPA requirements in getting a lottery scholarship program. The Senate did not go along with that proposal and deferred to the work of this committee. This committee has put forth an option, and you'll hear it called Option 2A. Okay? And Option 2A is this. It would say to students who would be enrolling at the university level, if you do not meet both criteria, then you receive half an award. So if you do not, did I say that right? Yes, okay. I caught myself there for a second. If you do not meet the criteria, then you, if you don't meet the GPA as well as the ACT requirement, then you receive half an award. That person could still enroll at the university, but would only receive half the award as their counterpart who met the lottery based upon both criteria. The thought is that a number of these students are likely not to be successful. They're at-risk students anyway going in, and might be better served going to the community college where they could take that same amount and possibly do better. The data show that the impact of this falls disproportionately to students in the TBR and disproportionately on students that are low income and at-risk students. So it is a difficult question for us to sort of come to grips with, because we know that something eventually has to be done with the money. If these students, if the assumption is that these students do go to the community college and become successful, I think that becomes a goal that we all can sort of wrap our arms around and say we can embrace that. If these students say, that's one more factor for me not to go to college and I drop out, then I think it is a mistake. So, Chancellor, that's been my analysis of this so far. I don't know what you want to add on top of that.
Yeah, and one of the important things that happened during the course of the committee's deliberations around this option 2A is in part because we asked, in part I think also because the University of Tennessee representative asked, the proposal defers implementation of that change for 4 years, so that it's really only effective, I guess that means to today's 8th graders would have this new system in place if in 4 years that system is still as it's described in the proposal, should that become law. Which gives time for families, gives time for institutions, our institutions, kind of adjust to whatever that might ultimately end up being. I mean, underlying the whole discussion, and Commissioner Huffman is here and can talk about this, but if we're successful, as I believe we will be, I think we'll make great improvements in terms of preparation of high school students as they get their diploma. If we're successful in actually having college-ready, career-ready high school graduates, then this whole conversation is going to have to be revisited probably before 4 years, because of the pressure on the lottery proceeds is going to be such that that we'll again find ourselves, I think, overcommitted in terms of what the annual production of lottery will be for scholarships. So the difficulty of sitting on a committee that has legislators on it as a staff person is that you're sitting there voting for or against proposals that legislators are making, and you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm going to need their help in a few short weeks as we take up all these other issues. So it wasn't particularly comfortable for me. I don't know whether Dr. DiPietro would share that or not, to be in that role. However, they did accommodate us by agreeing to defer for 4 years. So once they accepted that suggestion, you kind of find yourself in a position of saying, well, they listened to what I asked, and so therefore I'll be supportive of the outcome. What we wish is that there was an opportunity to rethink the whole lottery scholarship scheme in light of complete college, because when the scholarship program was first created, complete college was not an agenda item, but it is now. So we now, in a very real way, have identified completion as being critical to the state's future. The way the Hope Scholarship Program is structured may or may not further the completion agenda that Wendy talked about. And because the shortfall, it creates an opportunity to revisit the Hope Scholarship Program, because we have to do something different. How this will play out over time, don't know that the House will embrace the Senate recommendation, don't know that the Senate will embrace the recommendation that the ad hoc committee has made, and thus far the administration has yet to really weigh in on this issue. So there's kind of a lot of things yet to happen between now and the time an actual change is made. But if they adopt option 2A, at least there is a fairly significant amount of time that can be given to continuing to look at the issues and to make adjustments as necessary.
There's one other thing I would add to the proposal I neglected to mention, and that is, if that student does stay at the university and persists and does well, when they enter their junior year, they are awarded the full award. So they can earn their way when they get there.
I just want to make sure I heard something correctly. When we were talking about the addition of a student to the board, if that student happened to be added in their senior year, we were talking about, assuming they entered the workforce or they didn't go on to another TBR institution, we're talking about the possibility of them remaining on the board for one more year after they've matriculated?
If they began their term
Right.
as a TBR employee, pardon me,
Student.
student, if they began, let's say they began as a senior, they could stay on for that second year. Now, we can write it in a different way if the board feels differently about that, but that allows for both a junior and a senior to be able to compete for these kinds of positions.
It's also a little bit of a community college student issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just gives me, and I'm speaking only for myself, it just gives me a little bit of pause. We're a large system with a lot of very capable students, and I just feel like we may be limiting opportunities. Just a thought.
For more people to serve?
Yes.
For more people to serve.
I think you said that THEC and UT already have this system. Do they allow the student regents to continue on afterwards?
It's a good question, Regent Tom. I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Well,
I don't know. That's a
that
good
gives
question.
some guideline, not that we
Yeah.
need to follow it,
Yeah,
but some
but that's a good
guideline.
thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
To me, it's a little confusing as to how do they represent the student
Yeah.
constituency if they're not students? Who do they represent then? Themselves or?
They would be continuing on representing the student base, just not as a
But-
student.
But not really, because they're not in the student, they're gonna just still go back and have meetings? That seems a little weird.
I feel like I'm at the wheel here. It's not a big, if it seems like it.
What I
is
was gonna
better.
say is, I mean, yeah, it's a philosophical issue to which I think we all agree that, as it relates to the faculty and student region, 1 year, just as they begin to understand what's going on, bam, they're leaving the board. What we still need to deal with from a philosophical perspective is the mechanics of how that works. And I think we still have time to develop that issue, getting more research done from how THEC, UT is handling theirs, because, depending on the facts, I can lean strongly either way, but initially, right now, I have some concerns about a senior moving into a 2-year position and having left, but I would say that that senior that graduated from a TBR school still has a perspective of what it was like being a student and could be representing the interest of the students, even though they've graduated and moved on. But we don't have to decide, in my opinion, that issue today. The issue for today, and that's being presented, is the advocacy for making.
And I'll do a little bit more work on that, Mr. Chairman, just to see. I'm just sitting here thinking about it. I bet their statutes probably require them to be a student, and if they are a senior, if they don't go to graduate school and no longer become a student, they may not be eligible.
It would also eliminate a lot of community college students from consideration.
Mm-hmm. Who don't move on to a TBR
Right.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'll do a little bit more.
But for purposes of the action today, I am going to ask for adoption of the legislative initiatives agenda, and that agenda just includes the prospects of advocacy for making or creating 2 positions, one for an additional student and one for an additional faculty, and then we still will have time to work through the mechanics of how those positions are filled.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I have another question for David. Getting back to the lottery shortfall, I think I read in the paper, is there some conversation about increasing the amount of proceeds that go to scholarships and decreasing the awards?
There is, well, there's the prizes. This has to do with the gross proceeds that come back to the scholarship. And the brief on that, Regent Thomas, is this: that the way the statute is constructed of gross gross sales of the gross proceeds of the lottery, 35% is to be returned for the scholarship program unless it is determined that a lesser amount produces more revenue. And the idea is if you can return more money, you can produce more money by giving out more prizes. It produces more net proceeds to the education program. So there is this number that is in statute, but it's not fixed. The number is 35%. Currently, what is returning is 26%, but the corporation says what that yields to the lottery scholarship lottery scholarship fund is more money than if they had the 35% limit. Make sense or no?
Sort of, but let's don't get into it any further today.
They're trying to optimize. They're trying to optimize giving prizes, and the more prizes that can be given, the more money, actual money, would be realized into the scholarship program. But that's up for debate, and that's what you're reflecting, is the debate about should we go back to a different standard for what the corporation has to produce.
Any other questions? If not, you've heard the 2012 system-wide legislative initiatives that the TBR would be undertaking. Is there a motion to approve those as the initiatives for this upcoming calendar year, 2012? It's been moved by Regent Griscom. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Regent Kisper. Any discussions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposes the same sign. Motion is approved. Next item will be presented also by Vice Chancellor Gregory. It's approval of the minutes from the November 29th meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Capital Outlays and Capital Maintenance, which also includes a recommendation on capital outlay priorities. Vice Chancellor Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have two items coming around to you, and if it pleases you all, will wait just a moment and let everybody have those items before I begin. Mr. Chairman and members of the Regents, you have, as a part of your governing structure, an ad hoc committee on capital outlay. It is chaired by Regent Ferris, and this committee generally reports its work up through your committee on business and finance. It deals with the matters of capital budgeting. You, at the September meeting, as you would customarily do, approved the capital budget. Almost simultaneously with that, Governor Haslam was asking the respective boards of the University of Tennessee and Board of Regents to take a fresh look at their capital priorities in view of the fact that he would like to look at the possibility of trying to move capital, both capital outlay and capital maintenance projects forward in a more swift manner. And so we undertook that task, and your action today in approving the minutes of the Special Committee on Capital Outlay will allow us to forward the revised capital budget on to the Higher Education Commission either this afternoon or in the morning. And the counterparts at the University of Tennessee system are doing that as well. That's the position we find ourselves in. Now, what I would like to do is to refer you to the handouts, and with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to talk through the schedules first, and then I'll address the letter. The schedules, the first schedule you see are the capital priorities of the Board of Regents system. The first task we were asked is to give us a magnitude of the amount of outlay and maintenance that exists and take a fresh look at your priorities in view of the Complete College Act and also look at your needs for deferred maintenance. What you have on this initial sheet is the priorities of the Board of Regents system, seeing at the top the MTSU science facility that everyone is so aware of, and ranking down through the bold line on page 2 are the 14 projects that have been objectively ranked on our system. And out beside each project you see the project amount, and you see a description of how that project meets the goals and purposes of the Complete College Tennessee Act. That represents our capital outlay priorities. Those projects you see listed below the line are items that we are aware of as capital priorities, first priorities for the system, but are projects that have not yet been objectively scored. The next item you see on the screens in front of you is a description of how year one might go. And year one, I'm still on capital outlay. Year one would represent a request for funding for the MTSU Science Building at $126.6 million and a request for approval to fully plan the next 5 projects that appear on the TBR capital outlay list. That's the Nashville Community College new academic and support building, the Northeast State Technical Ed Complex, University of Memphis Biochemistry and Biology Facility, Vol State's Humanity Building, and Columbia State's Williamson County Center relocation. The amount for planning is $6,410,000 funded through institutional funds. And if you will just put a little mark in your mind, I'll come back to that in just a minute and talk with you when I talk about matched funds. All of the other projects are pushed into the out years and will be evaluated accordingly. What the full planning allows us to do, and this would be a new approach, it would allow us to be ready for construction when capital projects are funded. Currently, often we will receive both planning and construction dollars at the same time, or will be required to wait and receive those at the same time. That then sends our campuses into both programming and planning and about a year's worth of activities before we can actually begin construction. If we can advance those planning activities, it puts us ready for construction about a year in advance and allows us to deliver the facilities at an earlier period. Okay, the next item you have is the listing of the capital maintenance priorities, and probably the best place to look is the screen because it will summarize for you $222 million worth of capital maintenance projects. The target is slightly over $40 million per year, for each year for the next 5 years. We have, at the Board of Regents, objectively evaluated years 12, 13, and 13, 14 for priorities. The final 3 years still are there and are true projects but have not been objectively evaluated for priorities yet. This shows to the governor's office and to our counterparts at the University of Tennessee a means by which we could address some deferred maintenance projects over the next 5 years in a material way. To give you some order of magnitude, because I know you don't see these often, this past year we received $29 million in capital maintenance funding. If we were to receive something in the category of $40 million a year for the next 5 years, it would make a significant impact in deferred maintenance across the Board of Regents system. You have individually listed for you those projects year by year. And then the last I will speak to you about, and probably the thing that has caused us the most discussion in our committee, has to do with capital match. The challenge that was given to us by the Higher Education Commission was not only to look at your priorities as they relate to the Complete College Act, but also to look at the possibility of bringing non-state funds to the table to be able to stretch or leverage state funding. We have engaged in these discussions with ourselves along with our sister system at the University of Tennessee, so that this matching program might be a higher ed matching program and not a different program between the Board of Regents and the University of Tennessee system. We've had a matching capital program before. The matching program we've had in the past largely was not successful, and if I had to put my finger on one particular reason, it's been because of the unpredictability of the state match. So if I could just give you a fictitious example, somebody has a project on our list, they're required to have a match, the president, the advancement people go out and try to raise private funds, but with no assurance that the money will mean anything, that the state dollars will be there. With this kind of program and with the predictability, we believe, of state projects beginning to flow, it will allow a greater ability to predict that state funds will be available when private funds are available. The Higher Education Commission has given us a broad definition of match. It includes private philanthropy, and it also includes institutional funds. And so at this stage, we are asking for your approval of this new match program on that same basis. And what this would do is it would maximize, it would cap what an institution has to match at a project size of $75 million. That would cap two projects on our list currently, the MTSU Science Building and the Tennessee Tech Science Facility. And it would require a match of $18,750,000. The universities are required to match 25% of a project, community colleges 10%, non-formula units 10%, and technology centers 5%. The last page in your handout, Regents, is how that would look on our current list of 14 projects. So if you want to just flip to that last sheet, you will see, for instance, that the university projects, MTSU Science, would be required a total match of $18.7 million. University of Memphis on their biochemistry and biology facility would be required to produce $8.2 million. Let's take Nashville State as a community college example. They have a $20.4 million project and would be required to raise 10% of that, or $2 million. And the Tech Center project at $17.9 million would be required to raise just under $900,000. That is the match program that would be encompassed in these new recommendations for capital outlay. I don't want to catch you off guard, Regent Ferris, but I want to thank you for your participation in our discussions. Would you have anything you might want to add at this stage?
Well, I want to thank the staff for the excellent job that they've done. I also want to compliment the governor on his leadership and vision. This is something that we have taken around with as a board for several years, and as David stated, we really have not been able to do it. And it seems like now, with the leadership that we have in the state capitol, hopefully with the leadership we have in the General Assembly helping the governor, that we'll now be able to get some of these projects off the ground and get them funded and going. So anyway, I think it's great. I think it's great. And I'll make a motion that we approve the revised budget or David's report, whatever we need to do.
Yeah. Well, actually, that it is the minutes from
minutes.
the the ad hoc committee and the on capital outlay and the capital maintenance would be the motion, and I appreciate your making that motion. Is there a second? It is seconded by Regent Copeland. Is there discussion?
Just one question.
Yes.
Was there a reason for the cap on the size of the project? Because in the future, when you build science buildings, and those are two, and if other institutions sought that, I'm sure there would be some match. I didn't quite understand.
There will be a match.
Yes.
And
Still 25%?
And it's still 25%, but unless we change this policy, it would be capped at the $75 million level. And there was no real magic to that discussion other than trying to discuss what really might be the art of the possible. And you're right. Some of our projects are going to continue to get larger and larger. At some point in time, we may want to revisit that as a board. But what we were trying to do, and particularly since we have the potential of funding the science facility potentially this year, what could we reasonably get done in that period of time? And so that's kind of the basis of our discussion,
Did the committee
Regent
talk about what they would do if the size of the project was over 75 million?
Well, again, the cap, that they would still have to raise their cap. They'd have to raise 18.75 million. My words just aren't coming to me this afternoon. $18.75 million.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you can
And
do a
so
larger
the
project.
remainder could, I'm with you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not, since this is approval of the minutes, a voice vote would be needed, or is,
If we could take a roll call vote, just because it relates to expenditure of funds,
okay.
that would be the better
Okay.
part of valor.
I will follow your directions, have no problem with that.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, want to call the roll?
Thank you.
Well, yeah.
Regent Copeland.
Aye.
Regent Duckett.
Aye.
Regent Kisber.
Aye.
Regent Ferris.
Aye.
Regent Gatz. Regent Griscom. Regent Huffman. Regent Johnson. Regent Markham.
Aye.
Regent Montgomery. Regent Reynolds.
Aye.
Regent Roddy.
Aye.
Regent Thomas.
Aye.
Regent Varlin.
Aye.
Regent Weeks.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, may I just thank the internal folks who worked on this recommendation, Dr. Paul Stanton, Dr. Warren Nichols, James King, Dale Sims, Dr. Paula Short, Dick Tracy, who were very valuable, as well as the members of the ad hoc committee.
Well, yes, you may, and I was going to do the same because this has been a tremendous task in coming up with these recommendations, as well as I want to thank Regent Ferris for the work that he has done as chair, as I've done in the past. The next item on the agenda is one of those happy yet sad moments for me personally, but it is the resolution of appreciation for President Paul Stanton. And at this time, I would call on Regent Montgomery if you would present the resolution.
Thank you, Vice Chair. A resolution of appreciation for the service of Dr. Paul E. Stanton, Jr. Whereas Dr. Paul E. Stanton, Jr. has honorably and ably served East Tennessee State University since 1985 as a faculty member, department chair, dean, vice president, and as the institution's 8th president since 1997. And whereas during Dr. Stanton's tenure as president, ETSU has experienced unprecedented success in its tripartite mission of teaching, research, and public service. And whereas President Stanton has effectively translated vision into reality through the creation of such prestigious endeavors as the Rome Scholars Leadership Program, the Gray Fossil Site, which has been visited by over 250,000 people from all over the world, the Scott M. Niswanger Digital Media Center, the Catalog Community Partnerships Program, the First Research Foundation in TBR, and the University of Tennessee Systems, the William L. Jenkins Forensic Center, and the Mary B. Martin School of Arts. And whereas President Stanton has greatly increased the opportunities for students' academic success at ETSU by establishing an honors college, the Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy, the first College of Public Health in Tennessee, and in Southern Appalachia to receive accreditation from the Council on Education for the Public Health, the world's first academic major in bluegrass, old time, and country music, and the nation's first doctoral program in sports science and physiology. Now one of 13 doctoral programs at East Tennessee State University. And whereas Paul Stanton has, despite a tight economy and budgetary limitations at the state level, guided the university through a period of physical facilities improvements, with the Governor's Hall and the Centennial Hall replacing aging dormitory facilities, the Wayne G. Baszler Center for Physical Activity, Stanton Gerber Hall, and the acquisition through a gift from Eastman Chemical Company of 144-acre Valley Brook property in Sullivan County. And whereas Paul Stanton led the university in a year-long celebration of its centennial with the theme East Tennessee State University 1911 to 2011. Partnerships, promise, and hope for 100 years, while skillfully positioning the university to begin its next 100 years. And whereas, under Dr. Stanton's leadership, East Tennessee State University has achieved steady growth in enrollment, topping 15,000 students for the first time in its history in the fall of 2010, and enrolling 15,536 students in the fall of 2011. And whereas, during his tenure as president, Dr. Stanton has awarded with pride a total of more than 31,000 degrees. And whereas the Tennessee Board of Regents wishes to grant President Emeritus status to Dr. Paul Stanton for his record of success and leadership. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Tennessee Board of Regents expresses its sincere appreciation to Dr. Paul E. Stanton, Jr. for his outstanding contributions and accomplishments, and wishes the very best to him in his retirement. Job well done, sir.
Yes. And that is being made as a motion by Regent Montgomery. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been seconded by Regent Roddy. Is there any discussion? Wow. I'm going to be politically incorrect, and I do want to at least say, in my tenure on this board, I want to personally thank Dr. Stanton, because when I first came on this board, he was one of the individuals who, like many others, welcomed me, but there was a sincerity in his approach, in his willingness to help in any endeavor that I needed, and I personally appreciate that, and never thought I'd see this day, but I respect this day, and I have the utmost admiration for you, as well as your wife. Nancy is, yeah, no, she's moved, yeah. And I just want you to know before I call the vote, and I know I'm not following parliamentary procedure, I should take the vote, but I just want Paul to know how much I care and appreciate the work that you have done at East Tennessee State University and on behalf of the Board of Regents. Now, I will go back on script and ask for a vote on the motion that has been properly made and second, approving the resolution acknowledging the great works that Paul Stanton has done on behalf of of the TBR institution in East Tennessee State University. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposes, deal with me. Same sign. Thank you and congratulations, and at this time. You're welcome to go come up.
Wow. Thank you. Vice Chair Duckett, members of the Regents, Chancellor Morgan, members of your staff, friends, and my family from technology centers, community colleges, and universities, I love you and I appreciate you. Let me introduce, if I may, Regent Duckett, my wife. I'm not sure
Yes.
whether she was ever seen. Nancy, do you mind standing?
Yes.
We all know how important spouses are and family, and I've been blessed with Nancy for 45 and a half years, and I've been blessed with my positions at ETSU for 27 years. And I remember Regent Copeland, the last surgical resident I had the opportunity to train was your son Scott.
Get out of here.
So with this emeritus capacity, Wade, what do you do? With this emeritus capacity, I hope to go back over to where I started 27 years ago and do some teaching. I won't go back into the operating room after 15 years. Nobody would want me to do that. But I will be doing some teaching to medical students. And then also, of course, we have a wonderful successor coming into place in Brian Noland. Brian will be in service the morning after I leave, January 15th in his case. Many of you know Brian already, so I'll be doing whatever Dr. Nolan needs me to do in helping him in the transition, and hopefully continue to help him raise some money, because we all need to get these things that are on David Gregory's list accomplished. But thank you so much, Regent Montgomery, for the resolution and your friendship and the friendship of every person in this room. Never separate, I hope, the, excuse me. Maybe I ought to hit that. Never separate the technology centers, community colleges, universities. We're in it together. We're unique in that regard. Let's keep that novelty going strong. God bless you, and as they do in baseball, I love you.
Vice Chairman, may I follow up just one comment?
Yes, please,
You mentioned
Regent.
my son.
Yeah.
My son has shared with me so many times how all the students in this Department of Surgery, how much they respect you. And coincidentally, I also have a granddaughter at East Tennessee State, and she shares with me that the students there are just heartbroken that he is leaving. And I think that says it all. If the students love him, that's the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Copeland. At this time, actually, prior to adjourning the meeting, Chancellor Morgan, any comments?
No, other than just to kind of join what has been said. You know, there are some people in this world that you just feel like that it's a better place because they were here.
Yes.
And Paul, that is you. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Yes. I want to extend happy holidays to everyone. Our spring March, which is in March, quarterly meeting will be here in the central office. Wish, in addition to happy holidays, please be safe during the holidays, and if there are no further announcements, meeting is adjourned. Thank everyone for attending.